Off we go. Welcome everyone. I am pleased to have you on board today, and on screen here is our agenda for the meeting today. We've got quite a few things that I want and need to take you through, and so we will have some pauses for discussion and so forth, and I just encourage you to add to the chat facility as things occur to you. I'd like your input, welcome your input, but we're going to look at where are we now, the new model, assessors and assessment first of all, and then we're going to move into looking at it in detail at the learning provider assessment criteria, and I circulated that document and the reassessment one by email to you in advance. We'll have a break, and then we'll come back, and I want to show you the new online portfolio system, and show you that from an assessor's perspective. And then I would like your feedback and input to the Quality and Careers Standard Assessment Guide, the draft that I sent on to you. We've got to feedback, or we should feedback to the consortium by tomorrow on that, so there's going to be some time spent on that. Then looking at assessor support, the things that are going to help you and us do what we need to do, plan and put our heads together on that, and a summary. And then all documents will be circulated after the meeting, and I'll also make the recording available to colleagues who weren't there today. Okay, I'm going to move on. Just a little I suppose reminder of where we are. We know that the standard has been revised to fully incorporate those benchmarks, and the driver behind that is the third bullet point, the full backing from DFE, Gatsby and Careers and Enterprise Company, but attached to that are some caveats, things which have required some quite considerable changes and adaptations on our part, along with other licensed awarding bodies over this summer period. So where are we now? We've got a new model which we've revised to incorporate the revised standard. You've been sent that, and we'll look at that in more detail in the meeting. We retain our long-standing sub-license holder model for regional delivery. That's still in place, and that is not changing. We still have our primary school award, which is ours, and so it doesn't fall under the National Quality and Careers Standard at this time, although there may well be a move to have a national primary school standard in the future. But for now, that remains our Investor in Careers Primary School Award. And we've updated our IiC website. I've been to include the up-to-date new model information, and also adding audio-visual clips, and I'm continuing to develop those, partly from I suppose a marketing perspective, but also its client testimonials. But I'm also now turning attention to clips and recordings and support resources, which will go in part of our new online portfolio system. Having regular meetings on that with the developers, and we're looking at October for that to be ready and live, although I've got a test version which I'll demo to you in a while. So there's a lot been going on, and I want to sort of get into a bit more detail now about what that entails. Okay, so we spent time, and when I say we, a lot with regards to CSW Group, looking at what the implications for the revised standard are and the changes, and then looking at how do we adapt and how do we change and adapt with it, but also retain our unique investor in careers approach. And I think we made a good effort on that, and we're retaining our code approach of commitment, organisation, delivery and evaluation. But we've also had to look at how we make this a sustainable model, financially viable model for the longer term. And for that reason, we have looked to see how can we make ourselves more competitive in the marketplace on price, and we've found a way to do that. And we have new clients already signed up with us who are going through the new model now from September. So our cost for a new client is now £1,200 rather than the previous £1,650. And the reassessment remains at £750, and we've talked to all our sub-license holders and held meetings with them over the end of August and early part of September, and we are rolling this out, and it is live, and we've got new clients on board. So what does it mean then? We've been communicating out to clients about what it means for them, and there's an agreement with the Quality and Careers Consortium, including the DFE, Gatsby and CiiC, that existing clients who are in process on what is now our old model, although it's up until the end of December 2018 is the cut-off for those who are in process to complete under the old standard. I say existing there, I should have said old really, because since September now it's really the old version. So what that means is, well, for those who are at stage 3, we're strongly advising and encouraging them to make all efforts to complete under the model that they've been working on, and do that before December. Those at stage 1 and 2, we are recommending to them, and for stage 1 certainly, they will move across to the new model from now and work towards that, because the new model, stage 1, is really not much different from the commitment stage in the new model. Stage 2, unless they stand a realistic chance of moving or completing through stage 2 and stage 3 by the end of December, which really isn't going to be many at all, they should move to the new model. And I think this presents a challenge for everyone, but we are committed to trying to support all our clients to achieve the standard if they can before the end of December. But if it's not realistic, then they should move across as soon as possible to working to the revised standard. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail in a bit. Our existing holders will need to now follow the revised standard reassessment model when they're next reassessed, unless they have already committed and signed up prior to September. Those who had done that will continue again to be assessed before the end of December under the old model, but new or existing holders who are signing up now for reassessment will go under the revised standard. The other key thing, which is now mandatory within the revised standard, is that there will be annual reviews that take place around the point of their award date annually with each client or learning provider to review their progress towards the revised standard. And we see that because we have the largest amount of learning providers with us nationally, that's a challenge for us, and we're looking to the portfolio system to help with that, and I'll explain a bit more of that when we talk about portfolio. So that's a brief review and summary so far. Are there any sort of questions at this point in terms of any contacts you may have with schools and colleges that and any things that are unclear about the process for those who are in the process at the moment? No. Okay.
Ed, it's Claire.
Yes.
I've put a question up to you just in the chat box, but my worry, given we've got about 10 schools in Lambeth and then there are a few in the advisor area, just say it's not possible to get an assessor booked in. Is there any flexibility beyond the December date?
There is we can put forward on a case-by-case basis to the Quality and Careers Consortium for extenuating or special circumstances, and they'll look at that and give a decision, which is there's no right to appeal on it, but that's what was said at the meeting on the 28th of June when I went to in York. But ultimately, they're looking for, this would only be for particular circumstances. But if we had January and there was no way to get an assessor and so forth, and they're ready, then we could put that forward. And I understand the challenges on that. But so if there were reasons, then we could put it forward, but there would be no guarantee that they would agree. But if we've got them to a point where they are ready and it's just a case of the assessment taking place, then maybe we stand a chance with that. So I can ask the question of Paul again and just say, if that happens, then can we put forward into January and see what he says.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, I think what we can do is we will do, Joe, if you can make a note, is we can share, because not everyone will have seen the communications that have gone out to our clients about updates. We've been updating them over the summer, and then just this last week, Joe and I have contacted every one of our CSW group clients, depending on where they are in the process, to update them and advise them of where they are. And then people are now coming back and asking questions. What does this mean? And I'm doing quite a lot of work with individuals trying to prepare those who are at stage 3, but also talk to those who are going to move across to the new standard. We've also tasked our sub-license holders with that same job of communicating to their clients of where they are in the process. But we can send you that, so you've got copies of that. So if you have links with schools and they ask, you are up to date and up to speed on what they've been told as well. So we'll do that.
Okay.
I'm going to move on. So the new model, through the online portfolio system, all learning providers are now going to register through that. We're trying to streamline and automate the process. The administration from our end is tricky, and so we have invested in this new system, and registration, whether they're directly with CSW or with a sub-license holder, will happen through the online portfolio system, and all clients, whether they're direct CSW or sub-license holder clients, will use the online portfolio system from once it's ready. And so it will handle the registration, it will generate service level agreements and payment confirmations. And so that's been developed or is in development and being tested at the moment. The commitment stage will be assessed by us or the sub-license holder, just as the stage 1 has in the past. Assessors will be linked to portfolios and able to see evidence during the process. So a big thing that I wanted to change was the sort of linking and ability to see things. You as an assessor, once you're linked to a provider, will be able to see that portfolio as it grows in advance. And I'll demo things to you after the break in terms of how the assessing will go. And I'm hoping that it's really going to improve that side of things as well for us in terms of selection of evidence and preparing the report. But there will be just now one assessment visit for an organisation, encompassing the organisation delivery and evaluation element. So replicating as we've done for reassessment, there will be the one assessment visit. And that's a big change, but it's, again, how we are going to make ourselves more competitive in the marketplace. We were the only provider with 2 assessments, and it's models of sustainability from us to be able to continue to deliver investor in careers. It's as simple as that. And there may be counter arguments to it and so forth, but from a commercial perspective, that's where things have gone through our exec board and how things are going to be moving forward. So we're going to look at how that plays out and your role within it. So from an assessor's perspective now, we will be paying an assessor £420 for new model assessment and reports. An increase from the 375, which has been current, but that will still stand for reassessments, primary awards, and any old model assessments that are carried out before the end of December. So we've increased the amount to recognise that there is going to be an increase from the assessment perspective. We've looked at that. We've looked at also the cost per hour potentially against that, and have looked at a £35 an hour, looking at 12 hours of assessment time linked to an assessment, which I think is realistic and still fair. And that's where we're at. Down the bottom, those are the numbers of clients we have, and as an indication of potential work here. We have 36 who are working towards stage 1, 39 on stage 2 and 37 on stage 3, and we have 156 who are current holders who will come around for reassessment. So we have a large number. Some of those potentially will fall by the wayside. Some have been inactive anyway, but we are. And the key thing for us is that we have to get new business on board. So Joe and myself are being extremely active on that front. And the more business that we can get in, the more assessment work and activity there is. And if you are able to contribute to that and recommend, fantastic, because we do need it. This is ultimately a commercial enterprise, and this revised standard has significant implications for all of us, not least our existing clients, but for us as a company. But we're committed to it. We've invested in it now, and we've got a model, and we're going ahead with it. And we want to need your involvement and your expertise with this as well. We've got a relatively small cohort of assessors, and I look at that I would rather have fewer assessors with more work and more experience built up than lots who don't get to do much and so forth. So if we get a significant upsurge, then which we are talking to multi-academy trusts and so forth, then I would really hope that there is an upturn in assessment activity as well. But you as assessors are valued in this process, and that's where we're at now. So again, possibly a chance now to comment, ask questions, put anything on the chat facility before we move on.
Could I ask something, please, Ed? It's Sue here.
Yeah.
Most of the work I do is around reassessment.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to check about the payment for reassessment.
Yeah.
It says on the screen that it's £375.
Yeah.
But of course, it will be working towards the new model.
Yeah.
So which would involve extra work. So for the first time round for a reassessment using the new model, would that be £375 or would it be £420?
We're saying 375, Sue.
Right. Okay.
Those who are going for reassessment will be expected and will be having reviews with their sub-license holder or with us, if they're directly with us, in terms of preparation and review to prepare them for reassessment. So yes, I understand what you're saying, but that's the model that we've got here, that we looking at reassessment at 375. If things change and there are significant things that need to be reflected, then we will look at it. But that's where we're at the moment, Sue.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Ed.
I mean, this is a bit of a parochial question, Ed, so it might be better off screen, but say it's an area like Lambeth where you've had a particular agreement with them to take them through.
Yeah.
Then the annual reviews, would you be picking those up, or would there be an expectation that needs to be built in by Lambeth itself?
Yeah.
Because they're not formal sub-licensee. I don't know.
I know. I think we need to have that discussion, Claire.
Separately.
Yeah. So yeah, I take what you think. I take what you're saying, and I think the review process. Yeah, it presents the biggest challenge for us because we've got the most clients, schools, learning providers with us out of all the licensed awarding bodies. So yes, we need to think about that. And Lambeth is a slightly different model. So let's talk about that one sort of separately if we can.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm doing well so far on our timings. I'm sticking to schedule. So I think what I want to I think has taken us the final thing before we do move on is around sort of your requirements. We will be coming up for our Quality and Career Standard 3 yearly assessment, probably end of February, March of next year. And that's when they come and we need to present to them, and they look at what we do and how we do it. And one of the things is obviously working with our assessors, and some of the things that we've come out to you around GDPR, training, DBS and so forth. We'll need to make sure we've got all that and the assessor standards in place for you. And Joe will come out to you again on that to those who potentially we haven't got things in place for. Linked to the assessment work, we've got a document which you've indicated, and we know sort of where you'd be willing to go and what you'd be able to do, but you need to let us know about that. So we've got an accurate picture for geographical coverage and so forth, because again, we want and make all efforts to make sure that people get assessment work. But obviously your inputs to this will help us, and your inputs to helping us develop business as well is obviously welcome, because it means there's more work for everyone. We'll also look at the attendance, and one of the final sections of the meeting is to talk about assessor support side of things, but attendance of meetings, standardization, development and so forth. Again, we have to look at this commercially, how we've done things in the past with regards to the payments out on sort of hiring out venues and so forth. We've got to look at making every penny count. It's why I've been pushing since I've come into post to try and use these methods as forms of communication. But I think we need to look at how we do things, because there's going to be a lot for us as a license awarding body and assessor group to ensure that we're up to speed and we're confident and competent in what we need to be doing in light of the revised model we've got and the revised standard. So I propose that we will have investor in careers support sessions, as well as those that have been indicated by the Quality and Careers Consortium linked to the CDI as well. Okay, so I now want to sort of move us across to looking at the framework and the documentation which I sent out to you. So I'm going to exit out of this and bring up document here. I hope that you've had the opportunity to look at this and read it in advance, because what I don't intend to do is go through this with a fine-tooth comb, criteria by criteria, but what I do want to use this time for, and we set aside sort of half an hour for this activity really, is to pick up on some of the key points and start to make sure that we're familiarizing ourselves with the requirements and starting to think about how and what we're looking for in regards to assessment. And this will tie into the assessment guide that the consortium has put together as a draft version, and hopefully we can tie the two together to some extent. It would have been nice to have had the assessment guide before embarking on this process myself, but and I thank colleagues who've contributed to this as well. So as we said, I said at the beginning, it was important that we retain our investor in careers identity with this. So that has always been modelled and will continue to be structured around commitment, organisation, delivery and evaluation. I would encourage you, if you're looking at or talking to people about, well, how does investor in careers structure itself? Some of you know this better than me in terms of the longevity of investor in careers. And the fact that we have modelled it around this, I believe this gives us an identity, and this is how we're structuring things. So I would put that forward as a USP in any sort of communications you may have, and hopefully it provides a clear sort of framework to support the learning provider through the process. Already said that there will be the commitment stage, and then the organisation, delivery and evaluation. And a key thing that we wanted to do was to try and help with the creation of the portfolio of evidence. And to do that, we've identified types of evidence which should be essential within a portfolio and suggested. Previously, we had a list, but was non-directive. They were suggested, and experience has led me to believe that actually it ends up making the assessment process quite tricky sometimes to see the wood for the trees, to identify key pieces of evidence, and also for the provider. So we're trying to be more structured in that. Included here about the Quality and Careers Assessment Guide, and that guide that we're asked to comment on is viewed to be something that will be helpful to learning providers as well. I think it will be, and we need to make use of that in terms of providing guidance for us in our assessment, but also to learning providers, not just in their online portfolio or the portfolio of evidence they put together, but also how they are getting people in line for us to talk to as part of that assessment business and understand what it is we're trying to get to and understand through the assessments. Okay. So the commitment, as said, will be picked up by the license awarding body, us, or the sub-license holder. The key difference, I suppose, from our old commitment stage 1 is Compass is a mandatory requirement. Whatever you think about it, written in, and it's a non-negotiable in terms of getting the backing from the CEC, and so it's in there and it needs to be done. And we're saying that it should be completed since starting with investor in careers. But we would encourage them, if they've done previous Compass reports, because it gives you as an assessor and us the ability to see, well, what have they been doing? How do they believe they've been progressing and developing? There is one point I had a call with the Careers and Enterprise company yesterday, because they don't extend at the moment to Northern Ireland. We've got schools in Northern Ireland and they can't currently access Compass, but Careers and Enterprise Company are looking at that. If there is no workaround from their point of view, then we will come up and agree with the Quality and Careers standard on how we do that for Northern Ireland schools. But it is appropriate for Channel Islands, Isle of Man, where we've got clients as well. They can access Compass. This hasn't really changed from the old one. So ultimately, this stays the same. What happens at the submission of this is that a learning provider, as long as they met the requirements here, will receive certification to say that they are formally committed to working towards the Quality and Careers standard, and they are able to use that in their own marketing, and they can use the Quality and Careers standard logo and the Investor in Careers logo in the duration of progression through towards the standard. Okay, so organisation encompasses, as it says on here, you know, I'm not going to read it, you can read it, but this pulls in benchmark 1 or aspects of benchmark 1. It also pulls in what we had in the start of our old stage 2 in terms of how it's formalised within a CEIG policy document. It's incorporating the requirements in terms of it being publicised, put on the website, and you'll see that for schools the requirement for the provider access statement. So it's incorporating the requirements and the updates that need to be there for schools and colleges. Does anyone have any comments or suggestions regarding the organisation element, who's been able to read through this in advance? Okay, I'll move on then. But I think this is this element, you know, the policy document forms a key piece of evidence to this, supported by the assessment interviews. So this is seeking to establish the effectiveness of how they promote the careers programme, how they engage the key stakeholders. Students will obviously be involved in that, but will also be seeking to understand the strategic input from the governing body, senior leadership team, pulling in the new careers leader role as well. So we're saying that there should be responsibility for a nominated careers leader. So these are, I suppose, the new elements that we need to ensure that we are checking from an assessment perspective. And much of that will come through the interviews you have as an assessor with these key people. Okay, I should say that these within the portfolio system, which we'll look at, but these are not what we think of as stages. I suppose they're elements, and what I'm asking for is that once each of these elements of organisation, delivery and evaluation will stand alone to a certain extent, and from a perspective of giving alerts to us or the sub-license holder who's linked to them, and also an assessor who's linked to them, it will and should generate auto emails to say, yes, organisation evidence has been added and has been submitted. And so it will help from that monitoring and that progress perspective. Okay, so delivery is where I suppose the meat of things really takes place, and chosen to replicate the quality and careers standard approach, which is modelled around the individual, the Gatsby benchmarks. primarily 2 to 8, but pulling in again Gatsby benchmark 1. It's where things start and it's where things finish with regard to review and evaluation as well. So benchmark 1 sort of starts and finishes the process, and we've looked to replicate the quality and careers format in terms of treating each benchmark in turn. I didn't mention this at the beginning of we're running through this, but again, seeking to ensure that learning providers explain how the selected evidence demonstrate they meet the standard. So again, it's not enough for them just to bung their stuff in and hope that it sticks. We want to know why it's there and what it's there to do. The sorts of things that you as an assessor want and need to know, we want that to be part of the portfolio of evidence building process. We've done that through sort of evidence commentary templates, Word documents, and we want that and it built into the portfolio system as well. And it will also enable us to use audio recordings, and so a commentary could be added by a learning provider, talking in advance around their evidence and giving us information or context ahead of an assessment as well. So I'm keen that there's the facility to be able to embed links to recordings and so forth as another way to get that commentary and that context element included in the portfolios. Okay, so delivery 1.1 is the careers program. Again, key part of stage 2 and a key requirement within the revised standard. The recommendation to map it and link it to the CDI framework, but it's not mandatory. They may choose to use PSHE model. There are other ones available, but within the standard, it is the CDI that is recommended here. Differentiation between specific types of evidence and specific requirements for colleges and work-based learning providers. We've decided to not have 3 or 4 versions flying around and to incorporate as much as possible within one document. When a learning provider uses the portfolio system, we will differentiate and they will use one which, if they're a college of further education or sixth form college or work-based learning provider, they will have one which is including this content for them. If they're a school, then it won't. But on this document, the hard document, we're incorporating it within it. So it runs through the benchmarks in turn. I'm just wondering again if anyone's got thoughts about how we will go about assessing this with regards to essential requirements, key things in terms of it being explicit to. It's not just enough to say that they've got or show that they've got a range of impartial LMI resources. In order to fully meet the standard, there is a requirement that it demonstrates how students and parents and carers are supported in accessing, using and understanding LMI in decision making. So we're trying to be explicit, and the aim with this is to guide them towards what's required to fully meet the standard. I think helpfully within the assessment guide from the consortium, they're seeking to then show, well, what does fully meet look like? What does working towards or making insufficient progress look like? But this is from our perspective with regards to the portfolio of evidence. So any thoughts around the delivery side of things?
It struck me with something else, but I think it might apply to this as well. Something like that might be evidenced by having some small case studies about how a youngster has found the LMI or the careers information that they actually needed.
Yeah.
So that it comes right down to the nub of students actually using it and getting what they want out of it.
Yeah.
And the other place that it struck me that might be a useful way of evidencing is in networking with other agencies and evidencing referrals that have been made to either internal or external school support agencies.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful. I mean, I suppose it's always going to be difficult to encompass everything, and I suppose the caveat would be that, you know, whilst we're trying to show what would be essential, we see that there needs to be evidence to support that and suggested. We're also saying that learning providers should think about how best to present what's required in order to demonstrate that they are meeting the standard or making good progress towards. And I think that's where the input from the assessment guide document, and if we use that sensibly in helping to prepare better for assessment and guide our clients, it may well be then that we say, well, think about, have you got case studies and things that can demonstrate how things happen and how things play out in reality. But yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Any other thoughts around the delivery elements from anyone else? Some of the benchmark criteria are obviously bigger than others because they encompass more things, and again we've tried to separate things out to make it clear what each element is looking at. So certainly with regard to the reassessment model, it certainly looks more, and yeah, there is undoubtedly more required for the revised standard, but also we've separated out what actually quite a few things were bundled together into the criteria for reassessment and separated them out. So it looks more, it is more, there's no getting away from it, but it's looking to try and be very clear about particular elements of it. So within this, there's stereotypical thinking, challenging low aspirations and so forth. And then how they ensure that advice given meets the needs of all students, and effective partnership. So this was the bit that you were talking about, potentially case studies could come into play on as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then arrangements to maintain and monitor and record. I see, you know, benchmark 3 or D3.3 as we call it here, has been, you know, it's a big one. It wraps in a lot of things and try to break that down to be clear for the learning provider and be clear for us from an assessment perspective, the key things that we're looking and needing to focus on within that.
I think that whole D section is so big. It is really chunky. It encompasses so much. I think for me as an assessor, it will be the trick will be not to be so distracted by that and collecting evidence for all of that you know, you kind of marginalise the evaluation and the organisation side of it. So it's finding ways of being able to collect almost everything at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's a point within the assessment guide draft which talks about triangulation of, you know, effectively what we're trying to do is find ways, and this is where we need to put our heads together to find ways where we can gather evidence or ask the right questions of the right people to provide us with evidence that meets that. So this part of things that I've highlighted here, I see that actually, this is pulling in what was in stage 3 in outcome 6. And that was done in our old stage 3 part of things. Again, talking to people, you may well be able to gather evidence which links to how things are organised as well with it, because this links back to organisation in terms of how the careers programme and the structure and the people involved organise it. So it's being smart about things, and I suppose not getting too bogged down with certain things at the risk of neglecting others. I see what I like to do is, from the assessment perspective, for us to be able to use the portfolio system to pick and choose key pieces of evidence which we believe support the evidence towards that, and then supplement that with the feedback from our assessment interviews. So we can click and drag things from the portfolio into the report builder template, which we believe demonstrate if it's a good piece of evidence. And I think that's going to speed up that process to allow us to focus in on the interviews and getting that contextual stuff from the interviews, from the assessment visit. But obviously we're going to have to go with it and see how things evolve really from an assessment perspective. Okay, so I'd say that we have each of the benchmarks in turn. There's obviously the requirement that we will need, or a learning provider will need, to be able to present quantifiable evidence to demonstrate how they're meeting benchmark requirements. And we have that role. I think I can't remember, one of our assessors said, emailed me this week and said, we're becoming the guardians of Gatsby, and to an extent, we are, because we are being tasked with providing that external assessment based on the self-assessment that a school or college carries out with regards to Compass and the benchmarks. So I'm very, very keen that guidance from the Careers Consortium is absolutely clear about on that side of things, and why I wanted to include that in today's meeting and then feed that back to them based on what we think as an assessor group on that. Okay. So I want to run through things. I've had some feedback from one or two people, and also from some new learning providers who've already been introduced to it, and some things are around experience of the workplace, what constitutes meaningful experience, and again we try to sort of define that, but ultimately it's and I've asked you the question of the Quality and Careers Consortium, is that yes, we're looking at benchmarks, meaning numbers of interventions and visits and so forth, but what about the quality of it, and where does the balance with regards to that sit? Because I've already had conversations with learning providers saying, well, we don't do all of this, but what we do is really good. Under this model, they will be making good progress towards. It's how we manage those expectations. And also, I've had someone say, well, we could do that and we could just pay lip service to it, but the quality won't be there. What is more important? And I think that's a very important question. And it's one that I'm no doubt we'll all be wrestling with. But I look to feed that back within this guidance for the assessment guide to the Quality and Careers Consortium. So we are all clear on where the cut-off sits, and they're suggesting 5 or more is making good progress towards, and things like that. But underlying all that is questions around quality. And that's where we differentiate ourselves from just doing the Gatsby benchmarks. So, there's challenges here for us, but I suppose, also possibilities?
I think at first, I think this experiences of workplaces benchmark did appear to be a bit of a challenge because not all schools do work experience, as we know. But now that it includes, for a meaningful experience, now it includes the word workplace visits.
Yeah.
My experience has found that in other areas of the curriculum, students are going out doing visits, and sometimes the careers leader is not aware of this. So you might pick it up when you're talking to a teacher who is a tutor, and then you ask them about their subject area, and then they tell you things about visits they've done. So I think we need to encourage careers leaders to make sure they find out as much as possible about what else is happening in other areas of the curriculum.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Okay. A point of clarification which I'm asking for, which has again been fed back from a school that's been introduced to this, is the benchmarks say, and we've included it here, that because it's replicating what the requirements are, that all students considering HE have at least 2 visits to higher education institutes to meet staff by the end of Key Stage 5. Question was, well, if we don't have Key Stage 5, we're only 16 provider, then are we exempt from that? Do we have to, how does that affect us? I know what I think the answer is, but again, these are things that we have to be absolutely clear on. I think someone's got some feedback going on. I'm going to.
Can you hear me?
Can you turn off your? I'm just going to turn off your mics just for a minute, and see whether that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. That's very bad feedback, wherever that is. Haha.
Oh, that's done it.
That's fixed it. I don't know who waiting for name was on, because I can't see you enter the name, but I've just switched off your mic and that's done it. So I've switched off the mics for the moment, people, just to try and eradicate that nasty feedback. Got the text box. I'll turn them back on again in just a bit, but yeah, I think I was going to drive everyone crazy. Whoops, sorry, zipped around. What I wanted to do, just before we move on to the evaluation, see personal guidance. There's lots in here. There's lots of requirements and questions about it that crop up, and I've just tried to incorporate everything from the guidance that we've been provided with. But I see within the assessment guide there's still more there. But ultimately, we have to, as assessors, have confidence that the learning provider has the capacity to provide impartial and timely careers advice and guidance. But it's the benchmark focus on guidance. And I've clarified some things around colleges and workplace learning providers with regards to appropriate interview and defining, well, what is defined by appropriate interview. And I know that Sue Whitaker has passed on sort of something that I fed back with a sort of scenario that's occurred and so forth. And so I'm hoping within the assessment guide and the training that they're proposing to deliver to all of us, or we'll be all able to access via the CDI, that these are the sorts of things that will be really unpicked within it. Okay, I'm going to try and turn on. I'm going to turn on your mics again, people. See how we go. See, that was the problem one before. It's okay now. Okay, I think. No, coming back again. Uh-oh. Sorry, Claire. I think it's you, Claire Nix. Anyway, we'll move on. Okay,
Can I just ask something? Oh,
Wow. Yes, you can, but we've got awful feedback, whoever that is.
it's Julia.
Hi, Julia. You got
All right.
Okay, go
Shall
on.
I mute myself?
Could you just type it into the box, please? I see that people have been putting questions in, and we'll try and come back to them. But just to remind again that they're not forgotten. That's why the chat's there. And if we're not able to pick things up directly, we can come back on it and provide feedback if there's things I'm not able to answer right now. Okay. So, regards to evaluation. Pulling in, again, going back to Gatsby Benchmark 1, but it's the training and development, the ability of all staff and leaders, including the lead governor, to meet CIG responsibilities, understanding what those needs are, and then looking at potential training and development to meet those needs. Obviously, clearly got the role of the careers leader that's coming into force, and in terms of what's happening as a result there, is there a nominated careers leader, and if so, are they being supported and developed in that role? But also, it's these are things which and you've been experienced in assessing to date with regards to stage 3. And not a whole lot has really changed with regards to that particular criteria. And then E1.3, which kind of falls across the page there, and E1.4 is the review and the evaluation. So reviews, monitors and reviews its provision and its success in meeting students' career-related needs. Again, key point of, I suppose, difference and differentiation from the quality and careers standard from Gatsby is really the focus on impact. It's the so what. You do all these things, what is the impact part and how do you know? And that's where I believe our investor in careers approach and the quality and careers standards sets itself apart from the benchmarks in one of the key areas is around embedding this approach to continuous improvement, review cycle, evaluation, informing future development. And I think so that this element here, and I say to new people coming on board is, although this, if you look at it as a linear step-by-step model, you really shouldn't. You should look at it as that representation on page 1 with the cycle, and actually look at review and evaluation early on, because this is getting this in place is really key and crucial. Do not leave it towards the end. And I do believe that that's something that, again, having that sort of holistic approach rather than seeing, although you do go through it in a linear way through this standard, I believe that's really important, and that will be part of the encouragement and the input that's given to new starters to get them off on the right foot is to look at this evaluation requirement at the start rather than leaving it to the end. Okay, so that's a fairly quick run through. It's obviously in everyone's interest to become as familiar with this as possible. I expect that there will be questions. I expect there will be, well, what about this is? I expect as we test it out, say, well, that's not mentioned or that's not mentioned. I believe we've taken everything that should be in the criteria from the national standard. The issues likely to potentially, I think, crop up with where they say, well, this is essential and this is suggested, but what about this? What about that? Ultimately, it's for the learning provider to demonstrate to you as an assessor and to us as a licensed awarding body that they either fully meet the standard or are making good progress towards. And that's where we start to look at the additional guidance in the assessment guide. we're coming up on 2:10. According to me, it's 7 past. We're going to have a break. I just want to sort of open this up now to review some of the things that perhaps have been put in, and if anyone wants to open up their mics, and any comments and things before we have a 10-minute break, and then come back to start again at 20 past. So any comments, thoughts, suggestions at this point from anyone, please?
Ed, are you going to address the chat questions now at this stage, or are you going to leave it till the end?
Well, I'm just looking through them now, Joe. I can see, with regards to meaningful experience, student feedback could be a useful source. Yes.
From Julia.
Yeah, definitely. But it will be part of it because obviously a meaningful experience in view of what a student thinks may be at odds with what a learning provider thinks, but definitely, yeah. What else we got? My mic has been muted. Okay, that's Claire. All right.
Janet.
It might have been your mobile, Claire. Yeah, it might be feedback. Read provider access. I've come across some that don't have a named person. Is this acceptable? Janet, yeah, these pretty clear guidance in the statutory guidance and DFE. I've got one of the things I wanted to show to you, or think about, is some of the resources and things which we would populate the portfolio with. And these are some of the documents and things, but actually within the statutory guidance, there is an example of a policy statement on provider access, which is within the Investor in Careers handbook that I revamped. But it does say that providers should contact a named person. So they should do this. They should have it.
I'm not sure if you... Sorry, Ed, I'm not sure if my mic is working.
Yes, it is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to double check that because I know it does say a named person. But I recently came across a couple of schools that have just said people should contact our careers leader with no name, no contact details.
Right.
And that bothers me. I know I'm nitpicking.
Well, but this is what these meetings are about, is sort of uncovering some of these things, and this is something that I think I will feed back into the assessment guide on that. Is around that. If they say you contact our careers leader, if they can't find out who that careers leader is, then are they falling foul of something, and what is the implication from us from an assessment perspective? So I think it's totally fine to ask, because we need to know these things, Janet. So I'll add it, and we'll add it to the document that I'm sort of compiling to send back to Paul. Okay. All right, just before we break then, I think, well, it is time for a break now. I'll review these and we'll see if there's anything else, and I can pick it up towards the end if there's any other key points. Okay, so if you could be back, just after 20 past, because it's 11 past by my clock, 10 minutes, if that's okay, and we'll go again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn the recording back on. Okay. I'm also now, we're going to, in this final section of the meeting, we're going to look at the online portfolio, the new system which is in development, look at the assessment guide draft, and I'm really keen to gather your input on that so we can feed that back today to them, and then just a final summary and wrap up. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. So you should see on screen, this is our Investor in Careers website. If you haven't seen it yet, this is what it looks like. This is the landing page, and sort of our kind of colours and branding. there's a link here which currently goes to the old ePortfolio system, and fairly soon that'll direct to the new one. We'll also have another button here which will be to register, and as I said at the beginning of or early part of the meeting, registration for the Quality and Careers Standard with us will happen through the portfolio system once it's ready. But just before we look at that, just a quick run through, so just to familiarise you with things, a bit of a welcome. The Why Choose IiC section, we wanted to sort of have a section here which gives an overview. We've got some sort of feedback and clips from some of our clients, and I'm putting together one which will be an introduction to Investor in Careers and the Quality and Careers Standard, which I think will sit here. But again, we're emphasising our code approach and so forth. Section for how we work, so again, sort of relevant for particular types of learning provider. A section for case studies. Again, this is building, so people can look at case studies, testimonials and feedback by type here. There's Jeremy. Jeremy's ill today, but I interviewed Jeremy about his view from an assessor's perspective. And looking to build this up. So some of the schools or colleges that you go in to see have, we ask and if they would like to do a case study, but I'm keen to build up this audio visual stuff. I just think it works quite well, and if there's a couple in the pipeline, or just need to get in front of them or do it remotely to continue to add to this. But if you're talking to potential clients or schools and colleges, well then you're aware of what they can access through here. We've got an FAQs section, which I've been through and updated to try and reflect the requirements for the revisions and so forth, but some of the commonly asked questions, I expect I'll have to update this again as we get sort of more information coming back from the consortium about things, but it's as up to date as it can be. I did that sort of about just 10 days ago, and news and contact information. So let's say someone presses register, they then come to this, which is the registration page for a learning provider, and this either they can do themselves or they would do it supported by us if we've been talking to them and getting to the point that they want to sign up and register. It also captures the requirements that we need to register them, take details and so forth. It also populates and creates their e-portfolio, so when they're ready and they've signed the terms and conditions and so forth, it's all ready to go for them. So this will be an automated process, and I said whether they're a sub-license holder or directly with us, the registration will happen through here now. It will automatically generate terms and conditions and also generate a request for a purchase order number for payment or invoicing. And then we link to the sub-license holder, or we link to an assessor, and we can do everything from here. You as an assessor will have a login, which probably stay the same, but as the one you've potentially already got, but maybe not. But I'm going to just go in now on a test account. It's a good start, isn't it? All right. All right, we're in. So this is a dummy account, but this is an assessor, and you will see learning providers that you're linked to as an assessor will show up here. There will be the help and resources section, so some of the things I showed you, the documents and the guides, and also the audio visual guidance clips I'm putting together will go here. Investor in Careers Handbook, Compass reports, and this is going to change and become review and about a review section. So annual reviews, feedback will go into this section as well. But what we're going to do is have a look at, from an assessor's perspective, at Learning Provider 1. So this looks a bit like it would for a learning provider as well, that each of the elements, the Investor in Careers model for the standard, is here. There's a progress meter that shows for the learning provider as they progress. That's going to be linked to ensuring that they have evidence, or they are telling us how we will obtain evidence linked to the essential requirements. So again, it's not an indicator. It can't obviously measure quality. It can only measure numbers of pieces of evidence. But you can see here that the commitment stage is complete, and these are the criteria, and it also tells us how many pieces of evidence have been linked to particular evidence requirements, and we can click on that and it will tell us that this is linked to evidence of a linked governor. Okay, it's just a dummy bit. The overview would be there telling us what it's there to demonstrate. So we can see fairly quickly what is there. We can view the assessment, and once that's complete, which it is, it then opens up these sections. Now they can view stuff and they can do stuff, but they can't actually submit things until they passed commitment, much as they would with the old model around stage 1. So there's a communication button here. So this allows communication. I wonder if they've done what I asked them to do. Okay, yeah, they're doing it. So this is around sort of communication between a learning provider, an assessor, or a consultant, or sub-license holder support. So this allows feedback, comments, and so forth. So what I was keen to have is that everything gets captured and retained within a learning provider's account. So if they're asking for feedback and support from someone such as myself in their preparations, that's there. If there's communications between you as an assessor and that learning provider, that's there. And also, you know, it gets tracked. So everything's there in one place, because at the moment, a lot of emails go around, and wanted to pull it all together and have a history. So they've just kind of populated this with some dummy information for the moment for communication. So we can go in, this has been submitted, and we can look at assess stage now. Again, it's full of dummy information, and there will be a text here. And we can see that there's a drag and drop linked to evidence, which is linked to these criteria. And we can look at that evidence as an assessor and make a decision. Now, this is provisional because this is only based on evidence within the portfolio, but whether we feel that it is potentially making good progress towards, or it's fully meeting, or it's making insufficient progress. But this is not the final assessment. This is just based on documentary evidence that's added to the portfolio. But it's a case of drag and drop into these. So I wanted to make this as quick and easy as possible for us to start to just pick the evidence that we believe demonstrates how they are meeting or making good progress towards criteria. Then on this tab we have an assessment grid, and I've taken a bit of a steer from I'd already embarked on this before the Quality and Careers guide came out, assessment guide came out, and thinking we need to show where things are sitting. So we've got the 3 grading columns. We've got our organisation 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 here. We can select evidence that we would like to include, much as we do within our handwritten report or typed reports at the moment, to indicate the range of evidence that you have seen that you feel demonstrates or links to that particular outcome. So that can be selected. So we can say this again is dummy stuff, but I'm going to say 1.123 is right for it, and a title right here is appropriate. I'm going to save that into that section. So it's linked evidence is here. I'm then, as a part, I did this a little bit earlier in the break, but this is where our assessor comments based on our assessment interviews and visits would go. So much as you've written your reports in the past, you would add comment in there. In addition to the linked evidence, there are interviews with, that demonstrate, This builds up and will then populate a report at the end of that process. Now, what I'm looking for is to know for sure from the Quality and Careers Consortium that yes, they're sticking with the 5 or more benchmark requirements are required for making good progress towards. 3 or less is insufficient progress towards, and so forth. It will be down to us, though, as assessors and licence awarding body to make that decision. This system can't do that. It's very complicated for it to do that, and it's also problematic if we start telling it to say, well, it's counting 5 of these and 3 of those and what have you. It's professional judgment, it's our view, but what I wanted to do is to try and streamline the process and make it easier for us to select and populate and produce our reports, to cut down on, I suppose, time spent on writing reports. And I through the discussions I've had with the learning provider, they've taken this away, and they've done this in the last 2 days. They will also, I've given them our template, and it will have a section that when it finally generates it, and we've added selected evidence and our comments to the requirements, we will then grade it overall and then there will also be the section for overview about the learning provider, and then key strengths and areas for development, which I think is really important to have within our reports still as well. But for the assessing process, we can click and drag, we can add comments and link what we believe is the evidence from the portfolio as well as from the interviews, which we feel demonstrates, backs up our assessment decisions. So it's still a work in progress, but I think it's certainly an improvement. It couldn't be any worse than what we had before, and so I'm pleased with the way things are going. It's not there yet. The other thing linked to the reassessment side of things is that a portfolio of evidence, once it's been built, will stay within that learning provider's portfolio, but there will also be the review section, so the annual reviews, and from that I've given them some text for 4 key questions which we would ask at the annual review, and would want feedback, which would then come back into their portfolio and populate their review section, which is, you know, what has been the developments since your last review, what progress have you made towards, if you're still required, what has been key areas of impact that you've been able to establish, and what are the areas that you still need to work on. I'm paraphrasing it. I should have got the stuff up on the form, but what we want is to have a simple pro forma which they can feed it complete, and it then populates onto their portfolio system. So we'll have that, and we'll also have conversations with those people, and that will feed into the reassessment, because we'll be able to monitor and track it as they progress through their 3-year award period. And then they will also then be able to review their portfolio and add and amend for up-to-date things as required, rather than potentially building again from scratch. So that's the plan and the process, and we're seeing it from an assessor's perspective now, and it's relatively new for me. What I will say is that there will be a period of testing, and then there will be a period of training to get you guys up to speed with it. The provider said that they will provide guides, but I think I may well have to do some sort of instructional guides as well, just putting it into assessor speak and so forth, because they talk tech speak. I've got to try and be the interface between that. I'll do my best. So there we go. I'm quite excited about it for a number of reasons. One, it's going to make our admin lives easier, but two, I really hope it's going to make the assessment process slicker. It's going to look better to our client organisations, and we're going to populate sort of help and resources, and everything will be within one place here. Okay, so if there's any sort of comments or suggestions based on this, what we've talked about the portfolio, now is the time, because we're in development and the providers are keen to hear what we thought of it collectively as an assessment group, and how things could be potentially tweaked and improved. We're not going to totally overhaul and start again from scratch by any means, but in terms of the approach to sort of assessing.
Ed?
Yeah.
One of the things that I think it looks tremendous and incredibly usable. One of the things that I'm aware of is it is something that is going to be useful on a rolling and continuous basis. And some of the things that I've come across when I've been in schools is when you're looking at key evidence, particularly if it's documented, then very often documents, etc., have dates on them. One of the things that would be very useful on this is when it's online, any key evidence that has been seen, I think it would be really useful to ensure that there is the provision for a date entry in there, because then when somebody's looking at it, or if a new assessor picks up something from somebody else, they can actually see, chronologically whether there are developments being made and progress being made.
Okay. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying there. So, are we asking then for something that dates when the evidence was viewed, or dates when the evidence was or the document was created? So
yes, when the document was created, or when the activity was carried out, or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand what you're saying there, and I think I can see the relevance of that. I'm thinking that they should probably be able to put a date stamp on when things have been, I suppose, viewed by an assessor or someone to look at them. So how long ago that happened. In terms of the currency of the document, so I'm thinking it's likely to be things for like CEIG policy documents and so forth. Then that would require the learning provider to add that information potentially. Well, I can ask for a date field. Yeah, that's fine. Good. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes when there's a gap for you to put stuff up on when you're filling in forms online, but then there's a little I for information next to it, so you can click on that to tell you what to put in the box.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there was something worth putting, so that overview, they need to tell the story there about what their evidence is.
Yeah.
And however many times you tell people that, it's often a weak link.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, because that's not there, is it, Ed, as a guide within the system?
You're talking about it from the perspective of a report?
Not the report, more back to when the school or provider themselves is writing up, so the title and the overview.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to remind them what they should put in the title.
Yeah. No, I understand, and I totally agree, Claire. That that's really important. Yeah, we talked about that with the developers, and they can put and they will put information about it, and there will be and you can have information icons, as you said, that you can hover over.
That's what I mean. I didn't describe it very well.
So like on here, this I hover over this one, and it's telling me that this too says this is linked evidence. So it would be similar on that. And also, I've asked for we're not in as a learning provider at the moment, but when they're building their portfolio and the overview part, when they come to submit, it gives them almost like a warning, not a warning, but a sort of a page pops up and says, congratulations, you're about to submit this section. Have you checked that you have included this, this, and this? Have you included an overview to explain how? So I'm trying wherever possible to make that clear, and that's certainly part of the sort of get started process that I give to new starters. We're talking them through it. It will be a key thing, but it's really important. And the other thing I said is that it can eventually facilitate, and I would encourage, if they think it's a good way to go, that if they're happy to do an audio recording, like a narrative, to go with it, then that could be uploaded and a link could be put in as well. So it has the facility for that. Because I've had one school who's kind of did that approach because I suggested it to them, and the person putting together the portfolio, instead of typing everything up, actually gave an audio recording talking through each bit and why, and it was incredibly helpful. And it meant that you could listen to that and then look at stuff, and it was also answering things which you kind of want to ask questions on at an assessment potentially, but actually you're getting a lot of that information already. Yes, you've got to check that, and verify and ask other people and see if they're saying the same things, but it's really good. So I'm keen to try and promote different ways of getting that information and context. Okay.
Ed, I'm conscious of time because we're running a little bit over on that section.
Okay. Yep.
I was just going to say, we talked about the other day about timing out on the portfolio and what you're doing to discuss that with AXIA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to mention it to the ladies at all.
Yeah. Yes, the timeout. There has to be a timeout function on it for security purposes. And that's going to be set at 40 minutes, but it's overridden by any activity, any sort of clicking in, apparently, although this needs to be tested, certainly typing, but anything will reset it and it goes again. But I put forward that what I didn't want is things getting lost, people doing stuff and then losing it and so forth. And unfortunately, there's no getting around that being a timeout thing, but there is warnings and it's an easily thing that's reset. But also technology being what it is, yes, there is no sort of kind of save function other than when you complete something, it will save it. But if you're part way through something, you may lose it. So my recommendation probably would be for a fail safe that you may well type into a document and copy and paste into it to be doubly safe. But I haven't spoken to them yet. I've just raised the question and they came back earlier today on it. I'll obviously provide, there'll be training and support around this. But I want to make this a helpful tool to us all. I'm going to leave it there for now because Joe's helpfully pointed out we've got a schedule to stick to, so I shall do that. but it's in development. It's coming to an assessment near you soon, hopefully. Right. Moving on, then. Talked about this a fair bit today because I just see this as being really important to all of us. And this section is around the assessment guide, which is a draft, was circulated, was released on the 30th of August, and they want feedback by tomorrow. So based on what we add to this in this section, over and beyond what I've started doing myself, and one or two things that have been fed back by some of the sub-license holders, this is where we need to sort of get into this. So I would ask for, I've added some comments myself and also included ones that have been fed back to me, but I would ask for your comments, but I would ask you to type things in as well into the chat, because I don't intend to try and edit this as we go right now, but I would like to capture things so I can add to it. Within the introduction side of things, what thoughts do people have? I've wondered that with regards to 1.6 here, it says evidence not only from the school and college staff but also from young people, learner voice will be of paramount importance in reaching judgments. I've asked, well, what is the weighting of this importance in the assessment process, and how do assessors gauge this if it is of paramount importance? If learning providers know this, is then there a scope for coaching? Is there a case for having a consistent set of assessor questions? So that's my thoughts around this. I'll open that up to you as a group and see what you think.
I've already been back to Paul on the draft. I think I sent you it, Ed, my comments, but if I didn't, I will.
I don't know if I did get your comments.
Okay, because I'm really angry about that paramount importance, because I think it's contradictory with what's then said later about triangulating evidence. Yeah. Because you can't say that young people's view is paramount and then say that you're triangulating evidence from a range of different perspectives. It's mutually exclusive as far as I'm concerned. So I just felt it was a bit of poor vocabulary and overplay.
Yeah.
Particularly helpful. So in my feedback, I was a bit brutal about that language.
Okay. But I think we both focused in on that then as being something that has implications. And if you're going to use, paramount importance, well, how do you quantify that, and how does that impact on the assessment process? So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just put that in there for that. Okay. I wondered about this as well. 1.4, is this, because again, there seems to be a lot of repetition and saying things in different ways within this document. So it starts by saying, we must, as assessors, be confident of this, and then it goes into saying again how assessment verdicts are reached and so forth. I found myself getting slightly confused, and again, what's more important? Is it this statement, or is it a statement further on in the guide? So that's my view. I'm just throwing it out there to people to try and sort of stimulate some comments and thoughts about it. Anyone else have any thoughts around some of the statements that are used here? Bearing in mind, this will be viewed by learning providers. That's the aim for it. You can see someone's adding in some stuff on the comments. I'm not going to sort of stop for that right now. Okay. So this obviously, it says, requires us to train assessors in making consistent professional judgments. And section 5, I think section 5 is crucial and critical, because this is my my own personal view is this has been imposed on us, and then it's also being imposed on us that we should be making consistent professional judgments, which we will endeavour always to do. But if you're going to have a national standard and then ask us to adapt to that, you should surely be absolutely clear about what the requirements are. We will train, but we need to know what it is that we're training people towards. So that's just my view as a licensed awarding body on that. And one of those reasons is why we're running this meeting today, and we will continue to do these sorts of things. But I feel this section 5 is critical for all of us. So we'll get down to that in just a minute. We've got nothing, this can't be changed, no matter what you think of it, in terms of how it's worded, but that's that. So we go with that, and we've implemented that within our, on the portfolio and so forth. This one, best fit judgments. This was fed back by one of our sub-license holders, and I tend to agree. But this, again, where a learning provider may not meet the letter of all national criteria under each heading, assessors should make a best fit or close match judgment based on evidence. The assessor then decides whether the learning provider does that. Thoughts on that statement from anyone? How does that make you feel as an assessor? Clear? I would say that, what constitutes and where best fit or close match judgment things. So one of them is around this Key Stage 5 HE visits. I would also point towards the clarity around SEND provision within the standard, and what it says about that, and how we would make assessment judgments based on some of our clients and the learning providers work with very specialist provision. I know in the Lambeth sector, Claire, there's schools there. I'm supporting a very specialist, very small FE provider with SEND, only 16 students there. And yes, that best fit or close match, I'd like to know a bit more about that in terms of making our assessment decision. If it's just a professional judgment, well, close match judgment, fine, but I think I'd like to know more about it. Okay. This is your point here, Claire, triangulation of evidence. So we should be looking for corroborating evidence from more than one source to confirm their judgments wherever possible. I would agree, but I do agree also it contradicts the paramount importance, and it's the weighting of those sources of evidence in terms of making those assessment decisions. So is the view of the students more important than the view of a support staff or someone else? I don't know. But these are things that are suggested. Any other comments or thoughts around this? Okay, I will add something to that, just to remind me. I'll come back later on that. Yeah, cross-moderation, what do we think about this? So there's a suggestion here about more reliable assessments can be achieved by two assessors working together or by a sampling process.
I've just sent you my feedback, and I just said that wasn't financially viable in my view, but other people have a different view. And I think as well that it links to that point about 2.2.6 in terms of consistency, because it's more about, as you have, sort of things like sampling and methods for actually ensuring the consistency rather than just throwing two assessors at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what you're saying, Claire. I mean, I don't think it's financially viable to have two assessors working on an assessment for anyone concerned. We do have a sampling and a quality assurance process in place to look at that, and also then trying to share good practice and assessment approaches, report writing approaches, and so forth. So, but this is interesting.
You wouldn't accept, I mean, we do an assessment and then we send you the report. So you're almost, well, you're like an IB, aren't you?
Yeah. And sort of in modern terms, an IQA, internal quality assurance. And we also have our sub-license holders who are involved in that process as well. So we do have that. We do, I want to do more of the standardization and the sharing and looking at reports, and undoubtedly we will do that because we will need to as we start to move into this new phase with the revised standard and a new model. They're also making a suggestion for cross-moderation between license awarding bodies is to be encouraged. Again, I think yes, because how do we know? Ultimately, they're looking at, we're assessing to the national standard, but we are all going to have our own slightly different models, because otherwise, how do we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? So ultimately, we have to assess to the standard, and that's what we need to do. I've incorporated all the wording. We just made some tweaks to that to make it a little bit more approachable in our model that we were looking at before the break. But ultimately, we're all assessing to the standard now. Okay. Tidy it up. Okay. Any other? I'm going to just keep going down, but I would like people just to jump in and make suggestions or comments, because this is going to be a document that is for us and going out there for learning providers. So consistency. What do we think about the wording here? This point I've just been talking about. Inconsistency in applying that criteria, weaknesses in evidence collection and verification, assessors' knowledge and skills are inadequate or out of date, unconscious bias, assessor fails to monitor whether the learning provider is using the outcomes of the assessment to continue to improve, framework applied by the awarding body is too rigid, leaving little or no scope for the assessor to recognise alternative and innovative ways of achieving the desired impacts. There's been a couple of suggestions for other ways around case studies and so forth. I would hope that wouldn't be the case with us, but ultimately what we're trying to get to is recognising ways to do that. Yes, we've been more directive in the types of evidence we're kind of recommending or requiring now, but that is not the end of it. And my message to learning providers and to you and sub-license holders is that is not definitive, is not the exhaustive list, but it is there to give guidance and also structure to a portfolio. But a portfolio is only part of the process. That would be the message. I tend to agree with those things, and they're things we want to try and avoid, but that's a key thing. and this is ultimately it, is that these are expectations by DFE. They're expectations, they are not necessarily requirements, but for the purposes of achieving the benchmarks and the standard, they will have to meet those they will become they are requirements rather. But ultimately, if a learning provider decides this is not for them, and I think this is again, it's talking about the benchmarks. Clear distinction is made between the national criteria, which recognise performance beyond the benchmarks in terms of student outcomes and their impact on career-related learning. I think we talked about that earlier, but that's our kind of, if you're going to explain to someone, that's where Investor in Careers and the Quality in Careers standard extends beyond the benchmarks. I put in, this is a key importance in defining the assessor role, because this is Quality in Careers assessors will make professional judgments concerning the impact of a school's, college's provision on career-related learning, behaviour and practical outcomes for young people from a range of activities and counselling. That's it. That I feel is it, and sums it up. But it goes on, and we have it repeated in different ways many times in this document. But that's my view. Other people may have a different view, but I said, is this a repetition of 1.4? Saying something similar in a different way again. I just think you could strip quite a bit of this out.
I think anyone who's ever worked with Paul will know that this can happen. So Anthony writes the most brilliantly crisp English, but I suspect what's happened is then it's been added to and enhanced, and if the feedback goes that it would be helpful if it was clearer, more succinct and crisper, and that point is made, maybe that'll, because it's Anthony's next job, isn't it, to take everything from this feedback and respond to it. So I think if you offer that, because it's a massive document, isn't it?
It is. It's huge.
It's so overwhelming. So I think if it was possible to sort of say the content seems to be repeated. And I don't know what others think. And
well, I'm putting in, this is okay. It's coming from me, but it's coming from all of us. So if people have, want to include other viewpoints, that's absolutely fine. But that's kind of how I'm seeing it, is starting to lose impact because it's saying similar things in slightly different ways. And which is it?
I've got to agree with Claire there. She's taken the words out of my mouth.
Okay.
It's Paul and Barry being Paul and
Barry. Than you probably would have been, Janet. So.
Yeah. Sorry, say that again.
You probably would have been far more discreet than I was, so apologies everyone for that.
I don't know. I can waffle with the best of them, but that's another matter.
Okay. I added this comment here with this one. I said I felt it was helpful in explaining how the standard and our IiC approach extends beyond Gatsby benchmarks. I think this is helpful because I think one of the challenges is the so what. Why do the Quality in Careers standard? Why come with Investor in Careers when we just need to nail the benchmarks or say we've got them in our view? And I think this is sort of emphasising where it extends beyond. Again, I'm just thinking, but you kind of lose it because have you waded through how many pages we've gone through to get to this already? Okay, go on. I want to take us down to here now, because this is really key for us. Because this is the guidance here in terms of making judgments, and where they're starting to really get into well, yeah, what does making good progress and fully meeting the standard look like? And what are the indicators that as assessors should be looking for? So I put some comments in. Some of it says here, some of the national criteria. I'm just thinking, when you start to use things like some, well, we need to quantify, what this leaves it vague and should include reference to professional judgment or something, because otherwise it's just leaving it a little bit open. And if it is professional responsibility or judgment, fine, say it, and we'll argue the case on it. But what it does is it just leaves it, I think, from an assessor's perspective, leaves it a little bit vague there. I don't know, but that's how I read it when I went through it before. I'm just rereading my comments now. Are we clear on what the indicators in line 2 are going to be? Oh yeah, and again, all indicators are in place. So again, is that just down to us to decide, or are there specific indicators? I mean, I think they do give a sort of bit of a definition here, but I would like them to avoid woolliness or things. I prefer things to be clear, because I spend an awful lot of time having to sort of try and interpret things, and I just, I'd rather not and go, right, that's it. Okay, it might be tough, but we know what we need and they know what they need to do. So I want to throw it out there to people, has anyone else picked up things which within this section 5 which think that are important? I see this as being very important to us, and I'll be taking this once it's in it's an agreed format, but already I can see the way things are going with it. Because this has big implications for the guidance that we give to our clients in terms of how they're going to prepare and what they're going to need to be able to show and demonstrate, and what assessors will be needing to see. It has implications for the evidence requirements which we put in our criteria there, and there's more to it than that. And so I'm going to be using this document a lot, I can see. I just want it to get to the point of being confirmed as soon as possible, because we're already starting on this process. They've told us it's got to be done live from September, but we're still here debating, how it's done. So I'm impatient to get it finalised. Any thoughts from anyone?
I don't want to hog things, but one of the things I wondered was the introduction makes the point that the quality and career standard is measuring impact, not just inputs. And then I felt that a lot of the indicators were input or process driven, not output. So that was some general feedback. So I was thinking fully meets the standard. If there could be a few more descriptors that were more about impact and outcome, that would be helpful. So I thought, say something like the students and parents demonstrated good knowledge of the career provision would be an indicator under this criteria. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining that very well.
No,
but
I'm with you. More indication. Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think obviously that's got to demonstrate you're meeting the benchmarks, and there's quite a lot of quantities of things and demonstrable sort of delivery of things that need to happen. But it's the impact side of things, and I think that's a good point, Claire.
I mean, so what question? What does this all mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other thoughts from people? Just, it can be in general terms. Do we feel that this is going to be helpful to us from an assessment perspective? I hope so.
Personally, I think it is in general. It does need tweaking here and there. I've already put my comments through.
Okay.
So I'm keeping quiet and letting other people speak.
Okay.
But...
Okay. Yeah.
Ed, just to let you know, it's 3:15 now, so
yeah,
just slightly running over. I know that you've got a few more to go through there. That's
okay. I mean, I think we could spend all day on this because it goes on and on. I think what it is we're making some points around how things are worded, clarity, being concise and precise, but then also having some more definition or defined focus on the impact measurements and examples of how that could be demonstrated. I think that would be good. And if we don't get it, then we'll be incorporating that into our guidance as Investor in Careers anyway, because I would like to continue to retain our Investor in Careers, focus on review, evaluation, and continuous improvement and development. I think that's what we've always done, and that's what we want to do. We want to retain that within this. So, okay, I'm gonna leave this here. If you do have things, if you wanted just to email it across to me after the meeting, I'm gonna need to get this off this evening because they want it in by tomorrow. If you've replied direct, absolutely great. Thank you. And we'll move on. So we'll take us back to, here we are on the right place. So yeah, just as I've been saying, we need to get that back. A release is, I believe, planned for October. And then CDI webinars, again, have been talked about, but no sort of defined date or anything that I'm aware of yet. But I think that would be really important for everyone. I would, as soon as we do know dates and so forth, well, if they don't come direct to assessors, then I'll make sure that everyone knows about that and would encourage people to attend those because they're going to be from a national perspective. And I suppose the intention there is to make efforts to ensure consistency on a national basis. I've updated Investor in Careers Handbook, a document, support document. It's primarily aimed at clients, but I believe it will be helpful for assessors because it will not least tell you what clients are being told. Again, I did that before the assessment guide document came out. So I see that handbook plus the final revision or release of the assessment guide will be two key things for clients as well as assessors. So I will circulate the handbook to you as an attachment. And I'm going to be doing, sort of said, all support recordings. I've had a first go at some in terms of get started web clips. They'll go onto the portfolio, and I intend to sort of focus on each section. So commitment, organisation, delivery and evaluation, just giving some tips, approach and so forth. Commonly asked questions, reusable stuff, consistent message. It could be helpful to you, and I would actually encourage your feedback on them. Am I missing stuff? Because I'm very conscious I really don't know it all by any means, and collectively we know a lot more. So if there's things that you think could be improved and developed, I'll share links and I'm trying to make them not too boring. But the view, where are we? The view is that I want them to be consistent. And from my perspective, I don't want to be saying the same things over and over again to one person one day and then to the next. What I'd like them is to view that and then have a more informed discussion about particular points for, say, a new learning provider coming on board or preparing for assessment, and pick that up rather than going through the same things over and over again. So that's my reasoning, to make it reusable and consistent there. We're going to deliver some training and guides that hopefully they're going to do for us, but then sort of some, again, tutorial stuff, how to actually use that portfolio system I was demoing when I've learned how to use it. Assessor questions, I flagged it up in the feedback in the document we were just looking at, and we had a go at doing this in a previous meeting earlier in the year. I'm wondering whether we wait and see what happens with this assessment guide, or we don't and we just get on and do our own IiC ones. But I think we should have, for purposes of consistency, some agreed questions or formats of that triangulation side of things, how we're going to approach it, that we all utilise. Yes, I'm not trying to stop people having their own assessor approach, but I think from a consistency and a confidence side of things, it would be quite good to have. So we did have something. It will need reviewing, but I'm also suggesting that, you know, they may want to do something themselves. Web meetings, yeah, you may not be a big fan, but at least we've been able to talk, look at things and share things collectively today. And so from a travel time, cost and everything else, it's the way that I think we're going to need to do things. I want to potentially look at some topics. You know, obviously assessing the benchmarks and the standard being the biggie, but we may want to sort of look at some particular themes. I want to run standardizations more regularly. I'm putting it out there, but whether we do that on a quarterly basis. Again, you can comment now or have a think, but I think we're going to need to sort of have better, more frequent communications to ensure we're all moving in the right direction. And
can I make I make an observation? Please, can we make web meetings shorter than 2.5 hours? I'm finding it really, really difficult. I don't know if anyone else is, but I'm certainly struggling to take things in now. So I'd rather have more and shorter.
More and shorter. Yeah.
That's my personal view.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand that. I just think there's a lot of things I needed to get out there today. And yes, good point, well made. And I've done more than my fair share of talking, so apologies for that.
We understand. I'm not having a go.
No, I know. Okay. So, yeah, and the other thing is, one of the things we're tasked with, and what I've done previously when I ran assessments, when we ran an assessment centre for careers advice, I doing level 6 and so forth, is audio recordings of assessment interviews as a way to share technique and ideas, but also for reflection, but also improving consistency as well. And one of the things that we're tasked with as an awarding body is, yeah, we should be going out and doing observations of our assessors. Well, again, realistically, that's just not realistic. Actually, in physical, I'll be traveling all over the place to do that, and why do that? So I did this in the past with part of the reflection unit for level 6, because it really gets you to think about, well, what am I saying? What am I asking people? How am I doing it? But also to demonstrate quality assurance and so forth. That's an option. So there's apps and things on mobile phones, dictaphone apps and stuff. I'm putting it out there to see what views, whether people throw their hands up in horror or think, actually, well, that could be beneficial. I think I'd like to do it from my perspective as licensed awarding body and a QA perspective. But that's a thought I've had as a way and a workaround. So those are the things that I've got in mind. I want you to feel supported, but I also need your input and help as well. So it goes both ways, and that is time coming up very quickly. So what I would like to do is sort of see if anyone's got any comments and thoughts about what I've just been through about on the screen now, and or any comments and thoughts in general based on what we've been through that you want to raise now. You don't have to, you can send it by email or what have you, but just a few minutes left. Any thoughts?
Do you want to look at the chat comments at all and actually respond?
Okay, good to have a clear plan for standardization. Yes, agree on that. A meeting worked well, good point. Descriptors of each statements. Means would be useful from Julia. Yeah. To use the inspection criteria for some, most, all, etc. Julia, what can you expand a little bit on that comment? It might be useful to use the inspection criteria for some, most, all, etc. Just so I'm clear. Are you able to talk or type in perhaps? Okay. Consistent questions would be welcome, but I think that you also make professional judgment about what you're told. People will always be chosen who will give positive. Yeah, okay, this is in relation to the coaching thing that I raised. Yeah. Okay, I agree. Yeah. Okay, so Jill's comment was making good progress fully meets boundaries going to be most contested. Well, both the certificates by IiC. Yes. So in answer to Jill's question, both making good progress towards and fully meets the standard are both awards in their own right, but making good progress towards will receive a certificate saying making good progress towards, but we've got the templates for this. The fully meets the standard will be accredited as fully meets the standard, but both will be awards in their own right. And I think there is a job in terms of mediating or sort of managing expectation that for a lot of learning providers and a lot of our existing clients, making good progress towards is likely to be where they're going to be. Very few are fully meeting all 8 Gatsby benchmarks at this point. But the thing is that if they are embedding the principles of through investor in careers around certainly the review and evaluation and the continuous quality improvement element, then they are demonstrating that they have that in place. That doesn't change, and I think this is the bit where I picked up earlier in the assessment guide saying some of the indicators. I mean, we need to know how many and what the balance between quality over quantity is. But we will need to reassure, and learning providers will need to recognise that they can still be delivering quality, but maybe not still fully meeting all the quantitative stuff around Gatsby benchmarks. And that's for all of us to try and manage those expectations on that. Okay. Any other comments or suggestions? Janet's was you asked who will carry out the annual review, CSW staff or the assessors who are linked. It's going to be, I believe we're looking at it will be CSW or the license or the sub-license holder who will carry out the review. Scrolling back through, any others? Yeah, I think we picked those up pretty much, but if there's any, when I go back through, and I'll email it out. All right, so final things then really. There was one other slide, I believe. key messages. This is what I've told my colleagues, but I think it stands for all of us as well. You know, we obviously want and need new providers signed up and working with us. I put together an Investor in Careers key messages sheet. I think it's appropriate for you as well. It's really about some of the things which we've talked about today, but one of those key bullet points is below: the strong recommendation that schools undertake the standard as well as meet the benchmarks. And this point, Compass is a self-assessment check. Only by achieving the quality and career standard through us, not anyone else, can a provider receive external validation recognising additional quality beyond the benchmarks. You know, I think that's the bit, is going beyond it. And that point I just was saying about, you know, DFE, they were at this meeting and they said they recognised that it's going to be challenging. And then the question is, well, what happens when they don't make it by 2020? What do we do then? Do we move the goalposts or the timescales again? I don't know, but that will come. But I say, don't be put off. You know, working with us will help you meet the requirements. And that's me done. I've done enough talking and done enough sitting and listening. So I really thank you for coming on the meeting today. And for those people who weren't here, hopefully this recording has been helpful. We'll send out documents. I'll send out a link to this through our company YouTube, so you can click into it if you want and need to listen again. And we'll be in touch and keep you updated on any developments and things you need to know, and also line up for another meeting, potentially just a shorter one, to focus on key things, possibly when we get more news about the revision to the assessment guide and whether those CDI training sessions are going to take place and when they are, and then we can start to plan around that. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording now, and if anyone wants to sort of stay around and just talk, I'm happy to do that for a bit. Otherwise, you just click on the cross at the top of your navigation bar to exit out the meeting, and we'll be in touch.
Before you stop the recording, we talked about the percentage of providers that we actually have on our books nationally. It's a really, was it 3% that we have a take up, or? Oh.
No, we have, you know, we've got way more than that.
Well, not us, sorry, but what providers have taken up?
Oh, I see, 30%. Only 30%. 30% of the providers either currently hold or are working towards a quality standard.
Yes, but we're saying about the want and need for new providers. I mean, we've spent a lot of time, and I know you've worked really hard to actually get all this revised standard out to the schools and the assessors and sub-licence holders. When you say you want, obviously, help to sort of attract new providers, what do the assessors really need to do? What do you want from them?
I think if you're talking to schools and colleges, it's about sharing the fact that the quality and careers standard is there. Yes, they have the choice of the licence awarding body that they can go with, but I hope now we've got a strong model. We've got a good website. We're going to get a portfolio system soon that hopefully will really help and be beneficial. We've got a lot of positives there, and we've got a team of really good assessors, but the messages, you know, ultimately, to make this work in the long term and be sustainable, we've got to get more business in for ourselves. We need to retain those who are with us, and we certainly have done. There will be challenges with the revised standard, which we need to keep people on board. So part of it is keeping people happy and keeping them on board. The other part is encouraging new business to come on and do the quality and career standard. So my encouragement would be, it's in everyone's interest. If you want to continue to have assessment work with us, we need to keep having people for you to assess, and your input on that would be great. That's my message.
Ed?
Yeah.
Ed, could I ask you to do a blog for the National Careers Week website then, please?
A blog? Okay.
A blog. Reasons to do quality and career standard, something like that. Okay. I'll happily put that on the National Careers Week website for you.
All right. For Janet. Yeah. Okay.
That's great. Thanks, Janet.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording, but if you want to stick around for a few minutes, that's absolutely fine.